Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Michael Greenstone, and I'm the founding director of the University of Chicago's Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. Thank you for joining us tonight for this to kick off the Aspen Ideas Climate. It's always a wonderful time to visit Chicago. It's a little bit less because of the smoke that is coming from climate change and coming from wildfires, and is really the reason that we're all here today. As the event's leading academic thought partner, we're thrilled to be hosting this opening plenary. The University of Chicago and the Aspen Institute have long been closely linked, both in history and tradition. One of Aspen's founders, Robert Maynard Hutchins, served as president and then chancellor of the University of Chicago. He brought to Aspen the University of Chicago's commitment to bold ideas, inquiry, and dialogue. Every Aspen Ideas conference is now embedded with that spirit of curiosity and collaboration. And so it also comes of little surprise that our institutions share and have shared through our history some of the same friends and supporters. The Crown and Pritzker families have had long-standing relationships with both the University of Chicago and the Aspen Institute, marked by leadership roles and strategic partnerships. Jim Crown served on the board of trustees of Aspen and the University of Chicago, and his leadership helped shape both institutions into the form that we know them today. We're also fortunate to have a strong relationship and friendship with Margot Pritzker, the chair of the Aspen board, and her family. We're grateful for Margot's longtime advocacy for research and innovation to build a more sustainable future. Together, the University of Chicago, the Aspen Institute, and the Crown and Pritzker family share a belief that rigorous inquiry, principled leadership, and open dialogue are essential to addressing society's most pressing challenges. Of course, one of those challenges is climate change, and it must be addressed in a way that allows people to live full and healthy lives. The road to solving this challenge is paved with events like this one, moments where we come together to learn from each other, forge new collaborations, and share innovative ideas. We have an incredible agenda for just tonight, and then, of course, the rest of the week. Our first conversation is with former Secretary of Energy Ernest Moniz and Time correspondent Justin Worland. It's focused on the ways geopolitical upheaval is reshaping energy security and markets. We'll then hear from Tom Chi, founding partner of @One Ventures, about how cutting-edge technology can create a more sustainable future. And then we'll end the night with a conversation between the Obama Foundation's Valerie Jarrett and Allstate CEO Tom Wilson about how to rebuild trust across communities to reach our climate goals. But first, I'm honored to introduce two fantastic colleagues from the Aspen Institute who have been instrumental in bringing this event to life. Greg Gershuny, Vice President and Executive Director of the Aspen Institute Energy and Environment Program, and Kitty Pollack, Co-Director of Aspen Climate. I'm looking forward to a terrific series of conversations. Please give a warm welcome to Kitty and Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We're so grateful to be here today and for our partnership with the University of Chicago and the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. Michael, Sam Ori, Christina Costa, Emma Cronin, and so many others here at the university have been invaluable partners in bringing this program to life. Whether you've already spent the afternoon in 101s, seminars, or excursions, or you're just joining us, we're so happy you're here.
75 years ago, the Aspen Institute was founded on a simple but powerful belief. Bringing people together across disciplines and perspectives is catalytic. This same belief inspired the Aspen Ideas Festival, a place where big ideas can move beyond institutions and into broader public conversations. This year marks our 5th Aspen Ideas Climate, betting on the same premise. If we bring together leaders from government, business, philanthropy, communities across the country, the impact will be far greater than any one of us could achieve alone. You're all here today for that reason. While Aspen Ideas Climate is a testament to the power of convening, it's equally a signal of the strength of the communities that embrace it. We're deeply grateful to the City of Chicago, the State of Illinois, and partners across the Midwest whose leadership have helped this gathering reach new heights over the last 2 years.
That brings us to the two extraordinary partners who first welcomed us to Chicago, Kobe Weinberg and Rachel Starr. They met as future leaders at Aspen Ideas Climate in Miami and shared our vision that this gathering could become something truly catalytic here in Chicago. To be honest, they had us at Illuminati's. Together, they stood up an incredible advisory group that has created a drumbeat across the city and has sustained the momentum from last summer. During a moment when many were questioning the future of climate action, more than 1,500 of you still showed up in force, in large part thanks to Kobe and Rachel, our advisory group, and our phenomenal team. Everyone from this amazing group and our team, if you're in the room, please put your hand up and let's just take a moment to give them a round of applause.
And to our Midwestern partners, we're so grateful for your leadership as we met so many of you on our Midwestern road trip over the last few months. We drove through Indiana, visited Minnesota when it was 5 degrees below, and arrived in Michigan during a blizzard. Everywhere we went, in every city, in every coffee shop, and in every conversation, we heard the same thing. You should see the amazing work that's happening here. The examples were everywhere. A geothermal company in St. Paul deploying technology to help students stay warm while they study. An inventor in Detroit creating ceiling tiles that capture wasted heat and turn it into usable energy. And right here in Chicago, organizations that train residents for clean energy careers while helping them rebuild the neighborhoods that they call home.
One message came through louder than any other. Climate change isn't an abstract challenge. It touches people's healths, their livelihoods, and the places they care about most. This past week made that connection impossible to ignore. Detroit and Chicago are experiencing historically bad air quality, and fire season is only beginning. So against this backdrop, with this work more important than ever, we invite you to make new connections, challenge one another thoughtfully, and to continue building the relationships and ideas that will move this work forward. So without further ado, welcome to Aspen Ideas Climate and enjoy the program.
To kick off our first conversation, please welcome founder and CEO of the EFI Foundation, Ernest Moniz, and Time's Justin Worland.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are here to talk about the geopolitical upheaval of this year, which has obviously had really significant implications for energy markets and, by extension, climate. And it's hard to imagine someone who's better positioned to talk about some of these issues than Ernest Moniz, who, in his time as Energy Secretary, negotiated the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear deal, and then also led the response to the first Russian invasion of Ukraine. So he's got a lot of insight into all of the sort of most pertinent topics. I want to start maybe just with the war in Iran, which obviously has defined the year for energy markets. And just, it makes a case for a transition to alternative energy sources. Kind of inherently, we see the volatility, the challenges with oil and with hydrocarbons, thanks to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. Is this an inflection point of some sort? And if so, what sort?
Well, thanks, Justin, for the question. First of all, as an inflection for the inflection point, I would just recall you mentioned the 2014 invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That was a time when the G7 and the EU got together in response to that, relooked at energy security, and I think was the first time it was written down at the level of governments, at least, that going to a low carbon energy economy was an important security move as well as important for the climate, because as you imply, you're not vulnerable to the same kinds of fluctuations you are with fossil fuels. I think you could have asked the question, is this an inflection point then? The answer is it wasn't. We've continued to make progress on climate, of course, but nothing like at the pace that we would like or that the Ukraine invasion might have justified. Now, today, we're at a different point. First of all, technology has progressed a lot in the last decade, particularly on the electricity side, the renewables, storage, EVs, et cetera. So the situation is primed for a push on low carbon energy. However, there is also a countercurrent. And this reminds us that just as the climate and the energy security discussion are not separate, as we just discussed, neither is the social equity or affordability issue separate from that one conversation. And consequently, as LNG prices, liquefied natural gas prices, spiked dramatically, much more so than oil, in Asia and Europe, a lot of the poorer countries, especially in Asia, have done fuel switching, gas to coal, the wrong way for carbon. So I think there's a tension there. I feel that both directions will have some staying power. I think we are seeing evidence of some of the increase in interest rekindled, and especially internationally, electric vehicles, for example. I think China is going to export more EVs. They're going to export more solar panels. They're going to export more batteries. They're going to export more wind turbines, frankly. But the switch to coal is also real. And I think that once that switch has been made, you will see some of those countries, Southeast Asia, et cetera, sticking with that for quite a while. So it's a mixed bag. Again, history, in terms of the inflection point, history is not overly encouraging, but I do think this is, as I said, a different time technologically, economically, with clean energy. So I think it'll stick a bit more this time.
Right. Well, I mean, even seeding the ground, then seeding the point that low carbon is energy security. I mean, maybe it wasn't an inflection point, but it's an important marker today still.
Right.
So maybe just to zoom in on fuels a little bit, because oftentimes the conversation jumps straight to the power sector, to electrification. But you like to talk. I've heard you talk many times about the reality that final energy consumption is largely fuels still. And again, there's an obvious case. The price of jet fuel went up in parts of Asia. You couldn't access liquefied petroleum gas, for cooking. And so, I mean, do you think that this is the moment where folks, put the money in to build out the infrastructure and R&D for fuels?
Yeah, let me come to that. But first, just note that I think the closure of Hormuz has really focused a lot of people for the first time on the idea that it's not just oil and gas, but it's also a lot of the products associated with that. That's come into many commodities, helium for chip makers, fertilizers has become a big story, et cetera. So the disruptions go beyond the energy sector, although a lot of this is derivative products from the energy sector in the Gulf. Now, going to fuels, I think that's a very important point. First of all, there's no doubt that electrification is the lead horse in addressing climate, and we've made a lot of progress. I mean, clearly renewables, wind, solar, storage, for example. There's a lot of interest now in nuclear power as a low-carbon baseload source. Lots of interest in engineered geothermal. But the reality is, globally, it's not much more than 20% of energy delivered to useful ends comes from electricity. So it's growing, but the reality is most energy in the world, in the United States, it's about 2/3 as opposed to 4/5, but most energy in the world is coming from fuels. And one, I'm sorry to say that, but it's a fact that we have not had anything like the success in producing affordable, scalable, low-carbon fuels to displace oil. The reality is that oil is an incredibly effective fuel if it weren't for that little nasty carbon emission stuff. I can't resist using my physicist background to say that a gallon or a liter of gasoline has 4 times the energy of a liter of liquid hydrogen. So the volume density is much higher, and yet you can manage it at atmospheric pressure, ambient temperatures, et cetera. It's really, really hard to beat. The only counterexample is if you want to travel vertically in a rocket, the mass energy density of liquid hydrogen is higher than gasoline. So you prefer that if you're going vertically. But horizontally, you can't. It's tough to beat oil. And the reality is, we were mentioning earlier that if you look at advanced cellulosic biofuels, for example, there was an enormous interest in that starting around 1980 in response to the oil embargoes. And there was a huge push to develop those advanced biofuels. Well, it's been almost 50 years since without much success. And all of those initial researchers went to develop drugs because it was a lot easier and a lot more lucrative. So fuels is unfortunately, we don't like to talk about it enough. We need a lot of innovation on the fuel side. They're going to be here for a long time, even as we electrify, and we're just not there.
Well, of course, trying to be sort of cognizant of where we are in the Midwest, there is an interesting opportunity, as you said, with biofuels, if folks will get the R&D right.
Well, to say something that's very unpopular, but the reality is the one area of liquid fuels where actually there has been quite a bit of progress, and there's a lot more progress to be had, is corn ethanol. Speaking of the Midwest.
We're the right place to say that, right?
Of course, and it's reasonably affordable. It just won't scale.
Yeah.
So it still won't answer the mail as a scalable, affordable approach. But the reality is, and I have to admit, I did not realize this until we did some research on this 2 years ago, that corn ethanol now has about 58% of the carbon intensity of a petroleum-based fuel, and maybe more significant, there are 3 approaches, including like carbon capture and sequestration at the biorefinery, planting row crops, climate-favorable agriculture, et cetera, that we could go to zero carbon corn ethanol at a pretty low price on CO2 price per ton. But as I say, it still wouldn't scale. So we shouldn't get our hopes up too much, but it is interesting. It's the counter story.
Yeah, that's a good counter story. I want to maybe just reflect, as I started, there's a lot of geopolitical upheaval during your time as energy secretary, and you played an influential role as a negotiator, convening the G7 to deal with the Ukraine issue at the time. The U.S. has a different global posture today, one might say more of an instigator in some ways than sort of the sort of voice trying to calm things in some contexts. What are the implications of the new U.S. posture for energy markets and, by extension, climate?
Well, in 2014, when that invasion of Ukraine took place and we revisited energy security, the very first statement, the very first, at least non-trivial statement in the directive emphasized that energy security was a collective responsibility among allies and friends. Now, today, of course, we've seen that the Hormuz situation, has affected the United States directly only in the increase in oil prices, which is a global price. And so even though we are, quotes, energy independent, we're not really, because we are subject to the oil price excursions. But like our natural gas prices, I mentioned the big spikes in LNG in Asia and Europe. In the United States, we've seen nothing on the gas price side. But as we said, it's a collective responsibility, and of course, Europe and Japan and South Korea do not have the great natural resources that the United States has, whether fossil or, well, they have sun, they have wind, et cetera. However, that collective statement in 2014 was made in the context of valuing alliances, for example, understanding that the security posture of our allies would be dependent upon their energy insecurity for obvious reasons, and so we should be cognizant of that. Well, today, as we all know, the trust, I would say, in the United States as a valuable partner is not what it was in 2014, to put it mildly. So right now, I think that can have consequences in the sense of where our allies look to be supported in their energy security requirements. And we are seeing evidence that, well, look, for example, Europe has dramatically increased its LNG imports from Russia, despite the fact that the United States has the largest LNG export capacity in the world. I think that probably would look a little bit different if it weren't for the geopolitical realities today. And so the big issue, however, to me, is going to be not in energy per se. It's really going to be that if we go down the path of kind of a global decoupling of China and the United States in many ways, I hate to say it, but I'm not sure I know which way Europe would go. And that would have dramatic consequences in energy, but in everything. And so I think, look, I personally think we need to go back and strengthen our position with regard to alliances and friends. Cuts across so many areas. Another one, by the way, which is not directly on the subject here, but talk about nuclear weapons. Many of our allies and friends certainly have long had the technical capacity to make nuclear weapons, but have not, because they have come under the extended deterrence doctrine, under the nuclear umbrella of the United States. A lot of those countries are re-examining that. So this is highly consequential.
So, I mean, one of the things I love about climate is we can talk about a lot of different things under the umbrella of climate. I want to just close by bringing us back to this climate question, though. I mean, I think you hit out the tension that this upheaval has created, where there's both things that are pushing towards decarbonization, but other things pulling us back. And so I think the trillion-dollar question to just end on very briefly is, how does it net out from a climate perspective? I mean, do you think this will look back at this moment and think that this was a time where we, despite not talking about it in the diplomatic sense, we got serious, or markets took over, or is it too hard to say? What do you think about? How does this all net out?
I personally think the end state is not changed. We will continue to go towards a low carbon economy, maybe in ways that are a little bit different from what was imagined some years ago. For example, things like carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere are getting elevated dramatically, and I think will rightfully have a much more important place. But I think we're going to get to the same place. But the pace is certainly affected and different. And for example, this high carbon fuel switching, which I believe is going to be there for a while, is an example of, well, it's a step back on the overall global carbon trajectory. But I think the realities are that things like, continuing a warmer world, more extreme weather, et cetera, I think eventually is going to push everyone towards that same end state. I'm afraid we've lost some time. We've already lost time before the Iran war, and now I think these tensions will certainly in the developing world will impede us even more, I think.
Well, thank you for that thoughtful, nuanced conversation.
Thank you.
Very insightful. Thank you.
Now, please welcome to the stage founding partner at One Ventures, Tom Chi.
All right, we're going to kind of start at the beginning. Oops, where's the slide? Here we go. Since the development of agriculture, the human population on Earth has increased by about 1,000-fold, from roughly 7 million back then to over 8 billion today. And I think sometimes people hear this number and there is already a kind of tinge of discomfort, right? And where that tinge of discomfort comes from, if I were to analyze it, is we kind of conceive of human beings almost like a little unit of damage for the environment. And if you just have too many, then we're just kind of screwed, right? So let's try to have this not go out of control, da-da-da. And this kind of dates back to a bunch of ideas, population bomb, a lot of things happened that kind of created this thought for us. But I wanted to give you a potentially different way to look at the same question. So if you were to add up from the bio perspective, all of the biomass of humanity, it'd be about 350 million tons. That's what 8 billion people weigh, basically. And if you were to add up all the biomass of ants on the planet, turns out it's also around 350 million tons. So this is a way that we're kind of similar, but there's actually a lot of ways that we're similar. Ants build societies, they build architecture, they have different societal roles, they take care of each other, through the birthing process, they actually tend to each other's wounds. There's a lot of ways that we're similar. Actually, most ants are also omnivores, just like most of us are also omnivores, so very, very similar. But one way that we're quite different is human beings eat about 2.8% of our body weight per day. That's the global average. And ants eat about 30% of their body weight per day. So if you're starting with the same biomass, but one group eats 3% of the body weight per day and the other one eats 30%, then ants eat 10 times more food from the planet from us every single day. They're basically eating what a population of 80 billion people would eat. But I've not heard a single person raise the alarm to say oh my God, ant overpopulation. We're right at the planetary limits. Holy crap, these ants. If we get just a few more ants, we're done. Because it's actually not about the amounts. Actually, I didn't even pick the organism that has the largest biomass. There's a bunch of other examples I could have chosen that has substantially more biomass than humans, substantially more consumption of the planet than humans. It's not about the total amount, it's about the style. Because the way that almost every organism, honestly, every organism that has lasted for any significant amount of time, the idea that it operates off of is organisms that last for a long time provide more ecosystem services than ecosystem consumption. In the process of eating so much from their environments, literally 10 times more than what humans eat every day, or really for any time unit, because the rate is higher, then not only do they get something from the environment, but they aerate the soils, they recycle nutrients, they provide a huge amount of ecological services that actually help to enrich and actually improve the carrying capacity of the lands that they are part of. So this is the stylistic difference, right? If on all the lands that we exist on, we're actually improving the carrying capacity, then it honestly doesn't matter that much how many of us there are. We could literally eat 10 times more, just like ants do every day. Now, this is the golden rule for kind of all species if you want to last here for very long. We happen to be breaking this rule right now. And it begs the question, what would it look like to actually follow this rule? What would it look like for humanity to take its swing at becoming net positive to nature the way that basically every other organism in the biosphere is? I think we got to start at some fundamental broken ideas. So we've mostly done public policy. We've mostly thought about this issue. Oh, that's supposed to be a wingding of a leaf. Sorry about that. That letter Y is not a yen or anything. That's a leaf. But basically, I should have checked the slides. Anyway, but basically, we have this model where it's the economy versus the ecology. And every single time that you prioritize the economy, you do it at the expense of the ecology, and you flip it around and you want to go protect part of the biosphere. Too bad it's got to hurt the economy. That's at least the mental model that we come from. But that's an incorrect mental model of the world. A truer understanding of what is physically happening in the world. And I'm formally trained as a physics and electrical engineer with specialization in robotics and signal processing. So when I say a thing that is part of physics, then it is based on the math. Anyway, what is physically true in the world is that the economy is a subset of the ecology. And without breaking out a bunch of physics equations, I can prove this to you very easily. If you think about everything that you've interacted with in the economy in your life, or just literally everything physical around you right now, everything in the economy is either mined or grown. That means it comes directly from nature, right? We pretended for a little while that there's going to be these virtual businesses, and that's not going to take any physical resources, right? But I think we're now understanding that virtual businesses can take an enormous amount of physical resources. All of this stuff is originally mined or grown, simple stuff. It comes directly from nature. And when we adulterate nature to the point that we can no longer, use it to improve our economy, then we've basically destroyed both, because the economy is a tiny subset of the ecology. Right? If you actually look at how many exajoules of energy nature handles versus us, we're handling this tiny fraction. We're doing incredibly irresponsibly, right? We are a tiny subset of the energy use, the matter use. We're just terrible at it. Now, what does this look like? This is exactly how much we've been mining or growing over the last 50, 60 years. And you can see it's increased quite a bit, but you can actually see the exact proportions of mining and growing. Just to introduce this to you guys really quickly, this lighter blue bar, a lot of that is sand and gravel. We use that to do our cement, concrete work, that sort of thing. Then we've got the yellow bar, which is basically all the metals that we mine out. Then we got the dark blue bar, which is all the fossil fuels we just set on fire. And then down here, and that's where we're creating the problem. And then the grown materials have been increasing a little bit at a time. Now, what would it look like to actually, for humanity to solve that problem, to find a way to become net positive to nature? Here are the major arcs that need to happen. Because it turns out that we actually know a lot of ways of growing where we can repair nature in the process of growing. This is called regenerative agriculture broadly. It's a very deep subject. If you guys want to spend 5 hours with me, I can tell you all about it. But at the end of the day, we should increase our percentage of grown materials being used in the economy and have a larger percentage of those grown materials come from regenerative growing that basically restore landscapes in the process of creating the materials that we need. On the mine side, we can get better and better at technical recycling to be able to go reduce the new mining, virgin mining fraction. And the virgin mining fraction will also take care of itself because we will go pick the easiest places to get the material, then we'll go to the next place, then we'll go to the next place, and each time the price will ratchet up a little higher, and there will be a point where it's just cheaper to recycle it, guys. It just is cheaper. Now, we can get ahead of that curve. We don't literally need to wait until we break everything to do that, but we might. Just being honest, right? Let's be real about what's happened so far. But those are the big arcs. Basically, larger fraction of recycling in the technosphere, a larger percentage of regenerative growing in the biosphere, and a massive reduction in new extraction from that. And because of that, you're reducing that damage to nature that comes from mining. All right, just to kind of close it out, the way that we do it every day in our firm is through a very practical investment lens. Our firm is outperforming almost all of venture capital, not just folks in climate. And the way that we do it is we use this approach called the triad. The triad is basically disruptive deep tech, which helps to usher in radically better unit economics paired with radically better environmental economics. And what's great about this construct is you don't necessarily need regulatory to get this done. Every industry in the world is already excited about better unit economics, right? If you can get best unit economics with lowest integration complexity, you can go get industries to move well before regulatory, well before consumer uprising, well before all these things that force them to change. You can have them excited to change. And in the process of them adopting those changes excitedly, because they buy stuff from our portfolio companies being like, oh my God, I'm about to double my margin. And like quietly, we're like, oh, you will also get rid of 95% of your emissions. But we don't lead with that, right? Because they're interested in doubling their margins. I don't want to complicate it, confuse them that they're also doing a lot of good in the world, whatever. That's too much for them. That they wouldn't feel good as business people if they also had to have that thought. So given that, then I wrote a book about it. I'll be around the conference. You guys can grab me, give you a copy and stuff, and look forward to interacting with y'all. Thanks so much.
Now, please welcome to the stage Vice President at the Aspen Institute and Director of AIC, Gershuny.
All right, let's close our eyes. We're going to travel back in time, 250 years. As we arrive, the first thing you notice is the smell. Mud, coal smoke, the air is thick. When you open your eyes, you see the buildings are gray and horses slowly trot down the road. But you aren't in Chicago, and you're not in Philadelphia where the founding fathers are meeting. You're across the ocean in Great Britain. It's 1776. Here, over the last decade, an inventor named James Watt took an old machine, the steam engine, and made it more powerful and efficient. For most of history, power's been tied to a fixed source. Rivers, wind, horses, and human labor determine what could be built and where. But now, power's become mobile. Energy could go where it's needed. Industry could move, grow, and transform. That power is starting to pulse through the workshops and mills, the turning wheels and driving hammers, pulling whole towns into a new rhythm. And this is where our journey begins, at the start of the Industrial Revolution. When we tell the story of tech revolutions, we usually tell the story of the inventions. We celebrate the steam engine, the factory, and the railroad. Those are the headlines. They're loud, they move fast, they grab our attention. They're the melody. But a melody alone doesn't make a song. Every great song needs a beat beneath it. A steady rhythm that holds everything together so that people can play different instruments and different parts on top. For us, the beat is the set of choices that we make with institutions that we build around new technology. How people are educated, how workers are protected, how infrastructure gets built, how opportunity and prosperity are shared. And at the start of the Industrial Revolution, the melody raced ahead of the beat. Technology changed the economy long before society was ready for it. And many people in the early years, for them it was hard. The protections and the institutions that we now take for granted took nearly a century to develop. And when they did emerge, they were often built like bandages over a wound, not as part of a deliberate vision for the future that we want to create. But imagine that you're there standing in 1776, knowing everything that we know today. What would you build differently? How would you make sure that the tech doesn't simply transform society, but helps us become something better? Because that's the moment we're in now. And we're still in the first verse of this tech revolution. AI is the new melody, and it's arriving at a moment when our climate's changing, our energy system is straining to keep up, and folks are already feeling the consequences. The weather's becoming more extreme. The infrastructure that we depend on was built for the last century, and so is our economy. And we're already not moving fast enough to meet the climate goals that we've met. So once again, the melody's moving fast. The question is whether we can build the beat before the race is too far ahead. Build a beat that helps us build new things and earn public trust. A beat that accelerates innovation and reduces emissions. A beat that prepares folks for new kinds of work and makes sure prosperity is broadly shared. And a beat where communities aren't told what their future will be, but have a seat at the table to shape that future. The question isn't whether AI and a changing climate is going to transform America, because it will. The question is whether we can build the institutions early enough, strong enough, and durable enough to shape the transformation around what we actually need. And we can begin making those choices now. We're already seeing tech reshape the systems around us. AI is accelerating the discovery of new battery chemistries. It's helping us manage the grid more intelligently, especially on the hottest days when the system is under the most stress. And right here at the University of Chicago, researchers are using AI to better anticipate weather like the monsoon rains. Last summer, 38 million farmers across India received a more accurate forecast that the monsoon was going to come 3 weeks late. And it helped them plant at the right time. Because every day and every drop of water matters, that having more accurate info can be the difference between a good harvest and a disaster. So let's take another trip in our time machine, but this time we're going to go forward 50 years to the 300th anniversary of our nation. So we arrive in 2076. Here, the planet's warmer, the weather is more extreme, but communities are also more prepared for it. They have tools to test resilient solutions before a bridge or road is built. And we build for the climate that's coming, not the climate of the past. We've dramatically shrunk the time for breakthroughs, for new energy tech, advanced materials, and things that we couldn't even have imagined. Schools and training centers guide people down the path for new ways of working, and AI frees us to focus on the things that are most human: creativity, building relationships, and using judgment and empathy to shape what comes next. And as productivity grew, we made deliberate choices about what to do with those gains. The work week shrank, people had more time for family, more time for outdoors, and more time to enjoy our lives. And we rebuilt trust. Trust in our institutions, trust in the government, that it can work faster and better while keeping the protections that people depend on. So this is a future that can happen if we lay down a beat that generations to come can inherit, build on, and dance to, through the choices we make, the institutions we shape, and the people that we choose to build them with. And we're only at the beginning. The band is just getting warmed up. So over the next few days, let's use our conversations not only to understand this moment, but to decide what we want to build from it. What do we want our communities to become? What do we want our work to become? What do we want our planet to become? And what can we start building today to help get us there? So that's how we shape the future. That's how we build the beat together. Thank you.
And finally, please welcome to the stage Obama Foundation CEO Valerie Jarrett in conversation with Allstate CEO Tom Wilson.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the south side of Chicago, that side of Chicago.
Yeah.
I wondered what our walk-in music was going to be. Did you request that?
No, I did not,
All right,
but
just checking.
we could. I didn't know I got a choice.
I didn't know either. I didn't know either.
Well, welcome. We're here to talk about trust. And you might think like, okay, why are we here talking about trust as opposed to a science thing? And it's because trust is the root of everything, right? It's the basis for all society. Whether you look at Locke or Hume or Aristotle, everybody said, you need trust to get things done. And it's not just at the societal level, it's at the individual level. And as an outside observer, my view would be that dealing with climate change has a problem called lack of trust. And you might say, well, why do I come to that point of view? And I'd say, well, there's a couple of markers. One might be called the Oregon Petition or Climate Gate to opposing forces. Another might be the use of words that is divisive labels, like alarmist, doomer, denier. And so when you look at that, you're like, this doesn't feel like an area where there's a lot of trust going on, and you need trust to solve problems. So if you look at the math, and if you look at a high trust community, and you say, what are the odds, or how many people are heavily engaged in getting something done? It's like over 3/4 in America. It's like Americans love to participate. If you look at a low trust community, it's less than half. So you don't even get a majority. So what we thought we would do is talk about trust and share some stories. starting with what Valerie has accomplished at the Obama Presidential Center. So first, I got to say congratulations.
Thank you.
It is a wonderful thing.
Thank
you if you haven't been there, you need to go. I mean, they do it from the top with leaders around the world to helping kids in this underinvested neighborhood. And so they do it all. It's really spectacular. And they didn't get there by just waving a magic wand.
That is true.
So I thought we could start with some conversation about the Obama Presidential Center as a way to tell stories about trust and getting complicated things done. And so maybe Valerie, just start with share with them what was your concept behind it and what's the mission, and then give us some feedback on how'd you get it done, because Chicago might look like a simple city, but as Valerie knows, it's not simple.
Well, it does go back to trust. So when President Obama, near the time he was leaving office, he said he wanted to create a gift, and probably in Chicago, and it would house his presidential museum, if you will. But he said, but let's think more bold than that. And as he is likely known to do, he tends to go big. He doesn't go small. And once he looked at all of the different alternatives, and he settled on the site where we are located, which on your way out of here, you're going to drive right past it. So there's no excuse to not stop and walk through our gardens for a minute. And he said, if we're going to do it on the south side of Chicago, which is where I want to do it, Michelle Obama was born and grew up not far from here. As he says, all great things that happened in his adult life really started right here on the south side of Chicago. He said, well, then we're going to make it a part of the surrounding community. And he said, I'm not interested in a mausoleum or a tomb, a time capsule that just talks about my time in office. I want to tell a story about the history of our country and how we have a history of ordinary people who work together over a sustained period of times to do extraordinary things. And that history zigs and zags. And so when you visit our museum on the ground floor, you'll see, beginning with the Declaration of Independence. And we talk about slavery and the Civil War and Reconstruction and Jim Crow and the suffrage movement and the immigrant rights movement and the labor movement. And all of these movements that led to his presidency and his successes in office were founded on trust, where people came together, they put aside their differences, and they searched for common ground. And it zigs and it zags. It isn't always in a straight line. And when it breaks down, it usually breaks down through lack of trust. And so he wanted to create this living, breathing institution, world-class cultural institution with spectacular art, which is a centerpiece, not an afterthought, where people come and learn and engage and feel the sense of hope for what they can do back in their own communities. And what's been marvelous to see over the course of the time we've been open since June 19th is how many people from all over the world and from across the street come to this campus, and it's like pixie dust was spread on the campus. Everybody's friendly and nice, and strangers are taking photos for one another, and people wait in line for a long period of time just to go in the Oval Office and take a photo behind the desk, because we don't have the desk roped off. You can go and sit behind that Resolute desk and touch it and feel it and imagine what it might be like. And so joy and fun and experiencing our rich history and realizing our work is never done. And I would mention that on the outside of the building, there's a screen text from one of his favorite speeches that he gave on the 50th anniversary of the marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. And it's a challenge at the end. It talks about America, and the most important word is we. And it said, we are all responsible for that glorious task of continuing to improve this great nation of ours. And that is founded in trust. And so it permeates our entire campus, and we'll talk, I hope, hopefully about the sustainability, which ties us back into climate.
Well, and it's a great, you can see a great end, or beginning really of a story, but it started 10 years ago.
It started a long time ago, and it had a whole lot of community meetings where we went out into the community and we listened and we heard what people's hopes and dreams for the campus would be. And a lot of the decisions we made about the design of the campus came from this trust that we developed with the community. And we could not be inflexible. If we went out and we said, we really want to hear what you have to say, then we had to listen. And we had to take it in, and we had to go back and try to incorporate many of these great ideas.
And so for those who are not familiar with the whole thing, so we have a park along the lakefront, And there's a group called Friends of the Park who kind of like try to get to decide what happens in the park. So they don't always like things that might be great for the community. And you navigated that.
They sued us twice. We went to the Supreme Court twice. It went on forever and ever. But you know, and look, we live in a society where people are free to express their opinions, and we have a judicial system that's provided the checks and balances. And I will say that in the process, I would have liked to have avoided the protracted litigation, but it gave us time. You don't really want protracted litigation, but it did give us time to take a breath and really think through how to create this marvelous campus and how to design it in a way that it is really, I think, a national model for sustainability. And we took that responsibility very seriously. And so as technology has changed and evolved, we were able to incorporate, this is me looking at the glass half full, all of these marvelous opportunities that might not have been available 10 years ago. But now I want to switch back to you for a second, if I could.
Sure.
You can always come back to me. But I want you, because it's, as Tom and I have discussed on numerous occasions, to have a CEO of a major company decide that he's really going to devote a lot of time and energy and resources to this research that he's done about trust. I think it'd be helpful for you to share why. And you've talked about it a little bit in the context of how we were able to combat climate change, but as a CEO of an insurance company, why was this so near and dear to your heart?
Well, first, I believe that businesses have an obligation to do more than just make money. I think we have to make money. We get money from shareholders. That's what we're supposed to do. But we're supposed to take care of our customers. It's supposed to create opportunity for our employees. And it's also supposed to improve our communities. And those four things require trust to get done. So part of it is for our company to achieve its purpose, you got to have trust. Also, we sell trust. So like you give us your money and you trust that we'll be there when something bad happens. So, or in a rising tide raises all boats, and trust has been going down in America for 20 years. And we got a problem. I don't know if there's a Hemingway book where a guy goes bankrupt. He says, "How'd you go bankrupt?" And Mike says, "Gradually, then suddenly." And you think, how'd you, lose your friend from high school? Like gradually, then suddenly, like suddenly we had nothing in common. So we said, we got to deal with this somehow, even though it's sort of embedded in the air you breathe. It's kind of a mushy thing. And so we just felt like it was the right thing to do. And we got engaged with the Aspen Institute and have done a bunch of work, which is aligned with what Valerie is talking about. So it's hard to figure out how you got here. Like we did a whole bunch of work, like 2 years we spent like trying to figure out how do we get here, because you figure you know how you got here, you figure out how to path out. Really hard to tell. Bob Putnam wrote a really good book called Upswing. The only thing I don't like about it is the title is misleading, because you read the whole book and he talks about all the reasons why trust is down, and I'm waiting for the last chapter, the upswing. Where are we going? It just ends. I'm like, no, Bob, like, you learned all this stuff.
Yeah, that's up to all of us, right?
So we led to us, and it's exactly right. And so it's about building local relationships and building around things that are non-controversial, but things that are in common. And so in climate, I would be like, okay, remediation, nothing wrong with after a storm happens, getting various people together to work on that. Resiliency. Putting down sandbags, you quit fighting over what the genesis of climate change is. You're just figuring out, I'm going to try to stop the water from getting in my friend's house. So building local relationships. And you've done that here. I mean, you've done it in Chicago. And like, what would you say, like when you look across, I mean, you did it in Chicago, you did it at the national level, you did international level, whether it's Paris Accords or whatever. It's like, how do you feel like as an individual, you build trust with people who might not believe what you believe?
Well, as you were going, I was like decades of my life, like so many decades I've been doing this work. And it starts, interestingly enough, in this very community. When I was the Commissioner of Planning and Development in 1991, we started looking at neighborhoods that seemed ripe for redevelopment. And we wanted to make sure that it didn't lead to gentrification, and we wanted to make sure that it was driven by the community. And so I went out into this community and I listened. And I used to joke that, I listened to people regardless of the decibel of their voices. And I had this kind of a little attitude. I'd been at a big fancy law firm, and I'd given all that up to work in local government. And so I thought, like, I'm here to help you. Why don't you appreciate me? Why are you yelling at me? And their response was, because nobody from government has ever helped us or moved our lives forward, so why should I believe you? And then I was like, a light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, I have to actually earn their trust. I have to build relationships with them, and I have to start by listening to them. And so I spent a lot of time in this neighborhood listening, and I found out, well, who were the leaders in this community who actually people followed. And there was a pastor of the Apostolic Church of God, Bishop Arthur Brazier, and he committed to meet with me once a month, every single month, and he would bring the necessary key stakeholders in, and then we would have bigger community meetings and bigger community meetings. And over time, some of my closest friends were from this neighborhood. And it's because we built trust, and it wasn't about a title that I had, it was about a relationship that I formed. And that experience that I had in this neighborhood and in neighborhoods all across Chicago informed a lot of the work that I did when I was in the private sector at a real estate firm, and then when I was in Washington as a senior advisor. And it begins with listening. Just as I mentioned before we built the center, we went out to this neighborhood and we listened to people. And then Chicago has 77 community areas. We went to all 77 community areas, and we had meetings, and we listened to people throughout the city. And it helped inform us, but it also made those folks feel so valued. And so they feel this sense of ownership, and this campus and this center won't work unless people feel like this belongs to me, and I want to support it, and I want to give it resources, and I want to contribute my time and my energy to make it successful, because it's beautiful, but it's going to live and breathe by how people treat it and how people interact with one another. And all those lessons stem back to my work in local government. And so part of, I think, what we should all figure out how to do, and when you think about it in the context of the challenge that we have right now, I mean, I was so proud of the work that we did in the Obama administration, focusing on climate change. And the culmination of that effort, I suppose, was in 2015 with the deals that were struck in Paris. And of the 196 countries that signed on to that accord, 195 are still a part of it. And that's because, I can't speak to the one that pulled out, but I can say that the reason why I think it has stayed together isn't because they all came together on one day and signed an agreement. It was all of the legwork that went into building the trust that led that to happen. And here in the United States, it wasn't just the government, it was the business community, it was the philanthropic community, it was state and local government, and it was ordinary people who made this compact. And even though we have pulled out, a lot of that work is still happening, as you all know, right here in this country. And that's how change happens.
Well, it's a great story because it aligns with some of the work that Aspen has done as well, which is what you did was you respected people and you modeled civility. And we don't do that too much these days. And I think part of that is because we all live in this echo chamber of negativity. And if you think about all the negativity in the world, and we have people who track like who says positive things and negative things about you, and you get a net number, X positive, X negative. In America today, there's more negative than positive. That's not a surprise to anybody. But if you said, well, what's the net, and how much is that if it was an advertising campaign? It's a $100 billion advertising campaign of us against us, by us, more than the top 15 advertisers in America spend in a year. And you think, if we're living in that echo chamber and it's bouncing around us, like, how do we get ourselves in a position where we can model civility? You know, it's like you sometimes just have to check yourself and say, I'm going to check myself at the door, like, not listen to all this stuff. This is not about blind trust. You know, blind trust is where you listen to reinforce your beliefs. Authentic trust is about respect, it's about reciprocity, it's about predictability, not necessarily about agreement. And so what you did was, and if you think back on if you go to the Paris Accords, it's interesting, like as we're working on trust, we're thinking about like things that are non-controversial. So we're working in Appalachia on flood recovery with 4 different groups who all do different things, all have different points of view. We think it'll build trust amongst them to do other things. But they're doing flood stuff, so it's good. But in Paris, you had people who came in with points of view.
Yes.
How does one model civility when somebody, you know that they don't want to go where you want to go?
Well, you know, it's building relationships. And so you might start out thinking you're this far apart. And I used to love having unlikely bedfellows and meeting people who, all right, I might disagree with them completely about politics, but we really agree on criminal justice reform. I worked really closely with the General Counsel of Koch Industries.
Yeah.
Well, Koch Industries, let me tell you, they were not big fans of President Obama. But the General Counsel, Mark Holden, cared about criminal justice reform. And we got to be friends starting out on a narrow issue, and then we found out that we had more in common than we had differences. And I think part of modeling it is going into any situation with an expectation that you're going to find something in common. It doesn't mean it's my way or your way and somebody wins and loses, but you're going to really listen to one another actively. And you might change your mind. I mean, you should be open to changing your mind or certainly learning something that makes your position more well thought out than it was before you had this alternative view presented to you. But one of the ways I think that you model this, Tom, is that you actually give awards to people in the trust space. And I was wondering if you could share, are there any that have particularly resonated with you who are working in the climate field? And what did you learn from the folks to whom you said, wow, you're doing a really important job and we want to give you our award?
So what we did was we did Trust and Practice Awards, and we said you have to bring different people together. So it had to be at least 3 nonprofits. And come together, and they have to be different points of view. And so the one I talked about, Appalachian, was great. There's one in Maryland where they're doing community refreshment, like, and they're having older people and younger people with youth empowerment, and they're planting trees. Okay, is that billed as climate remediation? I don't know. Like, they're just happy they're bringing older and younger people together. They're planting trees, and we're happy to have them do it. So I think what we've learned is there's huge demand for people to come together. And if you can just get past all the negativity. So we put these awards out. We decided when we started it was going to be $500,000. And then we were like, oh, that's not enough money, so we need to do $5 million. And we got $800 million of demand. I went from hoping we would have people who would come for $5 million to having $795 million of unmet demand. And what that said, though, was people want to do things. People want to come together. They want to make a difference. They want to deal with society's problems. They want to stop people's homes from getting burned down. They want to stop them getting flooded out. They want to stop spewing stuff into the air and having our rivers we can't come into. So what it said to me is there is a strong awareness in America and a desire, if it can be brought together in a way that makes them feel safe. So I wonder if we could, so you've been at the Fountain of Hope for 20 years, maybe?
Long time.
Longer time?
35, really. That's when I met the Obamas, is 35 years ago.
Okay, 35 years.
He's always been a vessel of hope.
So what message could you give to this group about hope that would get them? So you've been through some good days, some bad days. You've had some ups and downs, whether it's a financial crisis. I don't even know what you've been through. But what would you say, like, you've learned in something that would give them hope and leave them here with some inspiration to go make a difference?
That our country is just rich with these stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things, that it positioned us with all of the advantages that we have. And look, I do not look at our world or our country through a rose-colored glass at all. We have some real serious challenges, but that's been the nature of our progress. And so I'm hopeful because of the young people who participate in our leadership programs that are in the United States and Asia and Africa and Europe, and they are out there every single day doing what I know many of you do, because that's why you came here. And that sense of you're not in this by yourself, that there is a community of people who share your priorities and your vision, and they may go about it in different ways, which will enable you to learn. That's what gives me hope. And I also would say, and this gets back to the point you were making earlier about kind of the toxic climate we're in, where there's so much negativity, is that most people are really good people. That's been my experience. If you're willing to look beyond the superficial and you're willing to actually get in there and invest the time to find out about their families. We were talking about being grandparents earlier. Well, there's nothing more cool in life than that. And you're going to find these bonds if you just are willing to kind of drop that desire to talk at each other and actually engage with one another. And it can be scary and intimidating, and you have to have a tough skin because people might say some things that you don't like, but boy, is it worth it. And it's the only way we make progress. And so I challenge you to get in there, get in the arena and do your part and model the kind of civility and trustworthiness that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, I love that sense of community, and that, you know, we're all leaders in our own way, shape, or form. Could be with your family, could be with friends, could be of an organization you're leading, you're influencing. And you know, one of the arts of leadership is to get other people to willingly go someplace they wouldn't go by themselves. Not too hard to get people to go where they want to go.
Yes, that's not leadership.
Yeah. And so I think as you practice leadership, think about trust, think about hope, and the lessons that Valerie has learned and created much stuff. And if you don't go see the Obama Presidential Center while you're here, you're really missing it. You need to go check it out.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you all.
Thank you all, everybody.